is going to be as varied and dynamic as the world around us. Dr. McGee Lawrence, welcome to the show. Should I call you McGee Lawrence, or what do you prefer?
You can call me Megan. It's a lot easier than that silly hyphenated last name.
So, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, as I like to say in the beginning parts of this program, I like to level set with some of the facts and figures. In the Did I capture it correctly in the musculoskeletal area in terms of the magnitude of what you guys are dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. Musculoskeletal disorders are a real problem, both in terms of healthcare costs and quality of life. This is something that we as a research community are actively devoting our careers to come up with new solutions for. So it's a problem that needs to be solved.
Oh, I hear you on that. So before we begin, tell us a little bit about you. How did you just didn't pop up? Where are you from? Tell the listening public a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my training is in biomedical engineering. So I trained in Michigan, at the Michigan Tech University as a biomedical engineer. Really got
Now,
it.
are you from Michigan?
I am. I'm born and raised in Michigan. Yep, and then I
Okay.
moved south after that. But yeah, I trained in biomedical engineering. I went into my education thinking that I wanted to get into chemistry and biomaterials. I was fascinated with the idea of making prosthetics. So that's kind of what
Okay.
I went over after a biomedical engineering degree. But then I got involved in research really early on. I was lucky to get a lab job as a sophomore. Got involved in some pretty cool research projects there, and liked what I was doing, liked the ability to do things that we didn't know the answers to yet, and then
Okay.
kind of went on that path and ended up in academic research now. So.
Now, when were you introduced to science? At what age?
Oh, early on, early on. My dad is a research chemist, or was a research chemist before he retired, and so we had science as part of everyday activities, even going back to when I was a little kid. I remember here's a good story for you. So when I was a kid, you
Okay.
Halloween, right? You roast pumpkin seeds, and so
Yep.
I was at my dad's house and I wanted to roast pumpkin seeds and I asked him, so what do we put on these? And so instead of like coming up with a recipe, he made me make a decision matrix for like all the different ingredients. And so
Did he
we had
really?
different batches, and then we kind of rank ordered them and figured out which one we liked the best. So yeah, interest in science and scientific measurements and all that go way way back.
Now, are you a family of one, family of three? How big is your sibling
There's,
group?
there's three, I have an older brother and an older sister too.
All in science?
No, no, I'm the only scientist. So my sister is in social work, and my brother is in technology industry.
Okay. Well, I asked that question because they say the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree,
Yeah.
and given what you guys are doing with this open door program and the age that you're focused on, that's why I asked. It was a
Ah,
kind of
yeah, yep.
and so let's segue a little bit. And so what type of research are you doing in the orthopedic arena? Tell us a little bit about the research you're doing right now.
Yeah, so my lab primarily studies bone. So we're interested in the reasons that bone sort of doesn't work as well as you get older, why the cells in bone don't maintain it properly as you get older. So that's a pretty interesting area of research in my lab. We're looking at the cells that make bone and why they kind of get lazy as you get older. And then the other thing
Mm,
that we're really interested in is understanding bone's role in the body. You think of bone as a calcified hard tissue that's there, and it's structural in nature, and it is, but it's also a really important site for hormones and endocrine signaling. And so a good chunk of my lab is interested in how bone talks to the rest of your body to regulate real important stuff from metabolism, calcium homeostasis, all those types of things.
oh wow, so that's quite interesting. I can peel back the onion on that quite a bit. And so your connection with your research and the organizations that you're a part of, like Orthopaedic Research Society, make the connection for me. How did you go from this professor to ORS to
Yeah.
some of the other prestigious things you're doing?
Right. So the scientific society, so the Orthopaedic Research Society and the American Society for Bone and Mineral Research, these are professional organizations that bring together scientists from across the country.
Okay.
With ORS in particular, I got involved with ORS as a student when I was a PhD student, even actually when I was an undergraduate student. That was the
Wow.
meeting that our lab went to. And so it was kind of my first introduction to scientific societies and what they do, and learning about everything that's going on around the world, basically, in terms of orthopedic research. So they're a huge resource in terms of networking and learning
Okay.
what's going on before even the papers come out, which is a really cool way to see what's coming up next.
And the nerd in me, the research that you guys do and the medical providers, are you guys ahead of them? They're ahead of you because they're engaging with patients who might experience some calamity.
Yeah,
Are you just help me with the connection between the research and what I might experience as a
yeah.
patient that experiences some musculoskeletal issue.
Absolutely. So these organizations that I'm a part of, they're a good mix of basic scientists like myself and clinicians, right? So at
Okay.
each of these meetings, we have a lot of folks that are orthopedic surgeons that are treating patients in the clinic every day and coming up with new challenges that they want to address from the clinical side. There are endocrinologists that are dealing with bone and mineral disorders and
Oh
trying to
wow.
find answers for their patients that may not be available yet. And so the beauty of these scientific societies is they bring together folks that are in the clinic and dealing with real life situations all the time, and then those of us that focus on real basic science mechanisms, so we can kind of all work together to move things forward.
And so, as we segue now into the open door program, can you explain what that is?
Yeah.
I could do it, but I think you're better at it than I am.
So the Open Door program is an outreach program founded by the Orthopaedic Research Society. It started back in about, I think it was 2018 or so, with the idea that it's one thing to do our jobs as scientists and kind of advance the fields, but we also want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of and the questions of folks that are going to ultimately be affected by this research. So the idea was sort of open the door to what's going on in the science of the members of our society and do a better job of communicating that to the public. So when the program initially got started, the focus group was patients. We thought that it would be
Oh wow.
great to outreach to your typical orthopedic patients, maybe somebody that's getting a joint replacement or somebody dealing with that type of an issue, to really let them know, okay, this is what's available today, and here's what we're working on the horizon. And so that was really the initial focus for the program.
Wow.
But over time, and especially kind of looking at where the interests of the audience were, it sort of grew into more of a STEM outreach program rather than reaching out to folks that are patients today. Instead, kind of planting the seed earlier for a broader outreach in terms of getting people interested in science and in musculoskeletal science in particular.
That's fascinating because I guess let's peel back the onion a little bit. I know it's important to get young kids interested in science. I still think science is sexy. A lot of people may not believe that, especially technology sexy now when you start thinking about AI and some of the technological things that exist out here. Um, and so, what caused the shift from patients to early awareness
Yeah.
in kids?
Part of it was the interest level of the audiences. So initially when we launched this program, we did have some patients show up and kind of participate, but the numbers in the audience were pretty low. And I think sort of to put a pin in it, we realized that we're pretty good at talking about science and trying to pitch things to different audiences. We're not always that great at maybe finding the audience and communicating that and trying to get people to come. Right? We're pretty good at talking to other scientists and writing papers and things like that. But in terms of getting an audience to come in and present some of this stuff, that was a little trickier. So the key moment for us was in 2020, where we'd done these patient focused outreach events. And then in 2020, we partnered with Grand Canyon University. And Grand
Oh
Canyon
wow.
University had a great STEM outreach program that they were excited to work with us. And so essentially, what we could do is we could provide the content and they'd provide the audience. And then that was really just a recipe for success that's kind of helped to launch the program and grow it from there.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So how do you go about expanding it? Because right now the program, is it all across the United States? Is it a certain
So right now,
place?
the we hold the open door event in conjunction with the ORS's annual meeting, and honestly, that's just a logistical point because this program is all run by volunteers. So it's scientists that are already coming to the site for the annual meeting to talk about science and network with colleagues, and so it's not too big of an ask to ask people to come a day early and do a fun outreach event like this. So right now we're holding it once a year in conjunction with the annual meeting, wherever the annual meeting happens to be held that year. But long range, it would be great if we could grow this into something that maybe our members could offer at their home institutions or at least in a region closer to where they are to have a bigger outreach.
Now, I do have to ask this question here. Any thought when you guys were shifting from the patients to uh, students, is that the proper way to say it? Students or
Yeah.
um, why not high school kids versus middle school kids? I mean,
So
did any thought? Talk a little bit about that.
yeah, yeah. So high school kids have been focused in the past. The first
Okay.
one that we did in 2020, the audience that was there was really made up of both high school kids and early college students as well. It was just really the who responded to the invitation to come. The
Okay.
second year that we ran the event, so this was in 2023. It was a mixture of high school and middle school kids in the Dallas, Texas area. So the shift to just middle school students was just this year, mainly based on the teachers that responded. So when we put on this event, again, we sort of rely on a local partner that knows the local community and knows where the needs are, and most importantly, has a direct connection to the teachers, the science teachers primarily, and knows who would be willing to take a field trip for a day and come hang out with us. And so, who we end up bringing, whether it's high school students or middle school students or a mix, it really just depends on what our local partner wants to do and where they see that a strong need exists in the community. If that
Well,
makes sense.
I applaud you. We live in a world where you know, when you mention the word diversity, it changes. If you're in the political arena, they're trying to erase it, but it remains to be a reality in healthcare. And so, as a researcher, and you're bringing in this STEM program, are you finding that there is a need? Um, where specifically is the need? Is it in the inner city? Is it in what part of healthcare? I just help me out from that perspective.
Yeah, I can talk mostly about the research angle of things. I think really what we're interested in doing is trying to get students, younger students, to sort of broaden their perspective, right? And consider a whole host of different careers that have a
Brilliant.
scientific bent to them, right? So, you ask a middle school student, what do you think a scientist does, right? And you're going to get a whole range of answers, but it's probably going to involve something like, being in a lab coat and standing behind a bench. And the whole goal of a program like this is to show them that there is a ton of options out there, whether you want to be an academic scientist, whether you want to be a clinician, whether you want to be a lab technician or work in industry. There are a bunch of different ways that you can, get more involved in science and have good, solid career pathways in there without having to necessarily, be a college professor, for example. And so from that perspective, we want to bring that perspective to the communities where we're able to offer the open door program, and kind of broaden the idea of what doing a career in science can look like and increase diversity that way. And maybe folks that may
That's
not
good.
have thought about pursuing a scientific career in the past might think, well, I don't want to be a college professor, but I definitely would like to go, make new materials or you see what AI can do or things like that, and still open up a career horizon in science to them, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And how large of a group of kids are you guys dealing with?
So the past couple of events, it's ranged on the order of 100, 150 so far. Again, it kind
Okay.
of depends on which teachers respond to the call, but we've been pretty excited with the groups we've gotten so far.
Okay. Okay. I like that. And so, is it right now in one city, multiple cities? Because I think I understand that it culminates at the annual meeting, which is in a city. But is it limited to where the annual meeting is?
So the event itself right now is just because of the resources we've got and the programming that we're able to offer. But that being said, our team, our volunteer team, is from across the country and frankly from around the world. We had a number of folks come from other countries this year to join us and
Oh
help to
wow.
volunteer with this program. So while
Okay.
the 1 day event and the community that we're serving from the 1 day open door event is kind of limited to where the annual meeting is. The other thing that comes out of it is that all the folks that come and volunteer, they might not have done STEM outreach before. And what they learn in the course of preparing for this event and developing hands-on activities or discussion panels, that's the knowledge that if they want to, they can take that back to their home institution and build on that and kind of maybe, nucleate new programs going out from there.
I think that's pretty important. So let's, I have a question here about a global perspective. You mentioned that they're from around the globe. Um, Are you seeing a need coming from certain areas of the world, or perspective coming from certain parts of the world?
Yeah, I would say that perspectives are different depending on where you come from, right? Just depending on what resources are available, what healthcare looks like in your country, what federal support for research looks like in your country, and it's going to be different depending on where you're coming from. And so I think an advantage of these, multinational societies is that they bring together those perspectives, and you can see not only what you may be dealing with on a daily basis where you're at, but how that looks in terms of a broader perspective of what the scientific community as a whole is facing.
And I'm going to ask this question about how do you measure success?
How
How
do
do
you
you
measure
guys
success?
measure success? I want to.
So the program's still in its infancy, right? It's been running for a few years. I will say that on a short term basis, we're interested in seeing if we have an impact in the kids. So have we moved the needle at all in terms of getting them more excited about science, showing them that there is diversity in science? That's a key focus of the event is having the folks that are talking with these kids look like the kids that are there, so they can see themselves in
Okay.
those career
Okay.
pathways. And so to track that, we do some quick surveys with the kids both before we start the program at the beginning of the day and then at the end of the day, just to say, okay, have you learned something? Do you think that musculoskeletal research, for example, is important for you for your daily life? Is it important for society? Is it something that you might want to do more with, further on down the line? And so the neat thing is that with a couple of years of these surveys under our belt now, we're seeing that needle move, at least over the course of what they get from the day. Longer term, I think that's going to be the question. Kind of thinking broader perspective and where this program could grow. We'd love to be able to track some of those metrics long term and say, okay, you participated in an open door event. What'd you end up doing in high school? Did you go to college? Did you end up
Okay.
doing these things long term? And we're not set up to track that now, but certainly if this
Okay.
program continues to grow and evolve, that's one thing we'd really love to know.
Well, it's interesting. Is the researchers and is that a diverse group of people? I don't know what the diversity measures are there, but
Sure.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. So when we plan the open door event, and once we realize who our local partner is going to be, the first thing that we do is we look at the demographics, the socioeconomic demographics of the school systems, and so we try to plan intentionally around who the kids are and what they might be interested in, what concerns they might have. So one thing that when we had the event in Dallas last year, it was a primarily Hispanic Latinx community, and one of our volunteers was real passionate about making sure that that was something that we addressed. And so we incorporated a diversity discussion panel. We had a number of our scientists and clinicians from different backgrounds. I think we had somebody that was a first generation college student, a couple of Hispanic Latinx scientists, some African American scientists, to really talk openly and unreservedly about with these kids about what their journey has been like in terms of their career, what challenges they've faced, things that they've overcome. Kind of a unique perspective of I've lived it, and this is what my journey has been, and the kids got chances to ask questions too and interact, which I thought was a great part of that.
And this includes high school kids too?
Yeah, yeah. So high school kids and middle school, and again, that's been the mix over a couple of different years.
And so since this is the this is the third or second or third year that you guys are doing this,
Mhm.
have you seen it expand to other organizations that might partner with ORS? Because what I'm trying to better understand, I understand that it started with patients, shifted to kids,
Mhm.
and that's great. Do you see another shift coming or an expansive shift?
Yeah, that's a good question. The short answer is you never know what's going to happen in the future. But I think what I have learned from this is that the current formula seems to be working. And that if we find a local organization that does this type of outreach on a regular basis, if we can partner with them and they can help us identify who we should be talking to, we've had just an outpouring of support from our members. They're excited to do these type of events and talk with kids that are excited about science, right? I mean, the level of enthusiasm you get is just unparalleled. And so I don't know that we would shift away from that anytime in the near future because we've just seen the volunteer response for this continue to grow as more and more of our members are learning about it. We've had more and more people reach out and say, I want to help with this. I want to be a part of this. So, whether or not we would shift away from a focus on kids, I think it'll depend on what the needs of the local communities that we come into are, right? So wherever the annual meeting is, and who we end up partnering with, if there's a different group that we should reach out to, and there's enough of an audience that wants to come do these types of things, then we could explore that at that time.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I was doing my research, when people hear diversity initiatives, they're thinking about employment, but you guys are talking about making sure that kids of all walks of life, all minority groups, are exposed to STEM. Is it fair to say STEM, or should I say musculoskeletal issues?
I would
Because
say I would say STEM. So obviously we're a musculoskeletal orthopedic research organization, so that's what we
hmm
know best, right? But the things that we're talking about with these kids, it's real basic stuff from how you apply engineering in science and how you
hmm
you
hmm
ask questions and find answers. One of the hands-on activities that one of our groups does is having them do measurements, right? And say, okay, what do you think would help you jump higher or change these things? And so while the general focus is on orthopedics and musculoskeletal science, it's really more about STEM outreach in general and getting kids excited about science in general.
which I'm a advocate for. My wife thinks I'm a nerd, a little geeky
Nothing wrong
person.
with being a nerd.
Because I remember going away to college, and my undergrad degree is bacteriology, and I came home and I had such a love affair with viruses that people thought I was crazy. But I still think they're pretty amazing. There's really not a whole lot we can do to fight them back. Look at what a virus did to the globe in terms of the pandemic, right? It impacted so many different things. So as you guys, to continue our conversation, as you guys move forward, um, you know, what will how will you how do you expand it? How is the since you're the chairwoman of this group, and I know you're busy, how do you keep it going and propelled since it's all volunteer? Are there things that you see that need to be done that you might advocate for, not now, that the listening public might send you guys a check or two, or people or something like that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, support is it would always be welcome because there's a financial tag associated with these things. We're coming up with hands-on activities for the kids, and we try to keep those as low cost as possible. But the more resources we have, the more we can look at doing with it. So in terms of growing the program, there's really kind of a twofold perspective, at least from my point of things. Um, One thing is making sure that we've got leadership opportunities for folks to come in and learn how to do STEM outreach and then
hmm
gain those skills. And so that's something we're trying to be intentional about in the programming is build in kind of pipelines for folks to come and volunteer for a year and get some experience and then see if they might want to increase their involvement the next year. Maybe they helped with a workshop one year, maybe they want to propose a workshop and lead one in the next year, right? And same thing for the speakers that we asked to come and talk about their science. We have some short talks to kind of cover the big broad spectrum of what musculoskeletal science looks like, from clinicians to basic science researchers to translational researchers, and opening up those spots for new folks each year to kind of increase their visibility and increase their comfort level. And so I think as we open up more of those type of leadership opportunities, that then becomes a skill set that our members can have and take back home and look at starting programs on their own. Something
Okay.
we've talked about, and this is kind of just in the early preliminary stages of discussions, but wouldn't it be great if we had some type of a grant mechanism where you could come and offer a workshop as part of Open Door, and then have some
Oh.
support to then offer that same workshop on your own home campus, right? Provide you with a little bit of resources to either support the materials you need or some help in organization or advertising, and then take this 1 day event and kind of spread that out across the country by providing some support there. That would be great.
That sounds interesting. Is that something that you guys talk about? Because that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, so it's certainly something that's on the radar and on the horizon. Any type of a program like that, it's going to take financial resources, and again, that's the second part of things, right? You've got to have the people to put the event on, and then you've got to have the financial resources to do it. We have been so fortunate that the board of directors of the ORS have supported this program and really helped us make it happen. But to grow the footprint, eventually that's going to take more resources, and so hopefully that'll come as we kind of, do more of these and increase the visibility for the program. Hopefully that'll kind of come with time.
I think so. Because I think that from, how long is the program for a child? Is it a 1 day event or?
Right now it's a 1 day event. Yep. So all day, starting first thing in the morning, going through the afternoon.
Okay, okay, and and would you say that the kids are more interested in the medical provider part of it or the research side of it?
You know what? It's been a good mix. We try to make it as exciting as possible for them. We don't want to just have kids and then lecture at them all day, but we do kind of have different presentations to show them this is what an orthopedic surgeon does, this is what a basic scientist does, this is what a translational scientist does. And the responses, the feedback we get from the kids, they're excited about all of it, right? They like the hands-on activities. We had them this last year. We had them build knees, 3D printed knees with ligaments. Some of them like that. Some of them were building a spinal disc and seeing how things work. So there's not one standout aspect of the program that every kid talks about. It really is. It just varies from kid to kid, and I think that means that we need to continue to offer a wide variety of things because they're all going to be looking for different things.
I think so. And so, where do you see the difficulty? As because I would assume that it might vary depending on what city you try to push this in.
Hmm.
So, where do you see the pain points?
It's I wouldn't call them pain points, but they're certainly things that we've had to learn from over the years, right? So the first pain point was figuring out how to find an audience, right? And how to exactly,
Yeah.
and I shouldn't say find an audience, but how to interface with the local community, because ultimately we're all coming from outside and parachuting in for this 1 day event, and so knowing who to talk to and where the needs are, that's always the trickiest part of the process. But we've gotten better at that and finding local groups to partner with. And then, along with that come the logistics of it. Where are we going to hold this, right? So,
Okay, wow.
the
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah, are we going to? We've been really fortunate so far that wherever we've ended up offering this event, somebody has stepped up and said, you know what, you can do this here. This past year, we did it at Long Beach Memorial Medical Center. They had some conference facilities that they offered to us free of charge. The previous year, UT Southwestern let us use some of their facilities. So, but just kind of the nitty gritty, nuts and bolts logistics of exactly how we're going to get everybody together, get the kids there, get them fed, so all the things that go into offering a full day program. It's just the part that takes a little bit more work than the actual fun part, which is, planning the scientific events, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because as I was doing my research, I didn't know that when you think of the Orthopedic Research Society, like wow, how much research do they need? But then when I was doing and I looked at the numbers, it's true that 75% of people over 65 have some kind of issue. And when I consider that musculoskeletal impacts so much of the human body, and when I think about, then you couple that with what these young kids are focused on right now. Are you seeing um, less interest in STEM from the youth that you interact with? I mean, and this is getting towards the before and after.
Hmm.
They might come because they're coerced into it or something like that. What's the before and after research suggesting?
So I think part of it is how you package it. In terms of the before and after, we're certainly seeing an increase in the kids' interest in learning more about STEM and getting more involved in it and things like that. But I think part of that is how you package it. We are so fortunate that we've had a couple of folks that have been part of this planning team that do STEM outreach as their career. John Drazen, Amy Loya, this is what they do on a day-to-day basis is they get kids excited about science through STEM outreach programs. And one of their earlier messages that they had for us as we were planning this program was that you might say, do you care about STEM to a kid? And they're going to think, what, is math? Like, no, I don't want to do math. but they're excited about sports maybe, right? And so, well, what could thinking about STEM and science in general do to help you get better at your sport? And that's actually one of the workshops is doing some measurements, some engineering devices to measure things like hang time with jumping and all sorts of things, but ultimately applying that back to something that they may deal with on a daily basis, like sports performance. And so part of it is in how you package it, and not kind of selling this as, well, you got to do science because science is important. But these are things that can help you get better at your sport. These are things that can help you feel better or exercise in a different way. And so it's a little bit on the messaging, I guess.
No, I see that. I mean, I think you have to. I think back to when I was in school. It's all about who can make it come alive, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be boring. English was boring to me, and yet I'm married to someone who's a great writer. And it just depends on what where you come from. So a few more questions about you. So you entered into the world. You got your PhD in what aspect of research?
So my PhD is in biomedical engineering. There's a lot of biomechanics. So
Okay.
my dissertation research was studying bone in hibernating bears. We know that the exercise is good for you, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the more you exercise, your bones and your muscles get stronger. But you look at it, and those that are subjected to long-term disuse, say somebody that's on bed rest or astronauts up in space. Once you stop loading in your skeleton, you lose a lot of bone mass. And so my PI at the time had this really kind of astute observation. Well, what happens when a bear hibernates for 6 months? Do their bones get weak? You don't see bears with
Great
fractured bones
question.
coming out of the den. And so that was my PhD, was kind of looking at bone strength and bone cells before and after hibernation and seeing what happens. And so it was a
And the
really fun
answer
project.
is
The answer is they keep their bones strong when they hibernate. It's
okay.
pretty cool.
Okay.
So there's a whole lot of potential reasons for that. You probably don't want to get into, but it was a fascinating project. It got me excited about research and logical questions that we just don't know the answer to. So that's kind of how I got involved in science from there.
Okay. And so as you look into the future, any comments you want to make to folks who might be thinking about putting together a diversity initiative aimed at kids? And do you think, as a secondary question, we need to bring the patients back into this?
Yeah, so good questions. So if you're thinking about starting a program like this, I would say the most important thing to start with is find out what the needs of the community are, and make sure that you're tailoring the program to who the audience is going to be, because ultimately that's going to be what has the biggest impact. If you're talking with kids or audience members about things that they really care about, that's going to be what they remember, right? I think the second part of it is getting a good team. I'm a scientist. I'm an okay scientist. I'm a teacher. I'm an okay teacher. I am not an expert in STEM outreach. So when I started, running this program, I was really coming from a place of not having a lot of experience there. But there are a lot of folks that had that experience, and they were just invaluable to the team. And so I think surrounding yourself with folks that know how to deliver a message like that, how to really operationalize a program, is a real key metric to success.
Hmm.
And then what was your other question? Was
On bringing the patients back.
bringing the patients back. I think absolutely, it's certainly something to look at. Our thought right now is that if we can get kids excited about science, and they're open and impressionable and excited about learning these things, it's not just an impact with them, but it can be an impact with their families too, right? So one of the things that we started doing with this event, we have a participation certificate to say, hey, you came, you did this, you learned this. But on that certificate, we have a QR code that links to ORS webpage that talks about musculoskeletal facts and figures, right? Things that are important, why you should care about mobility, why you should care about your bone and muscle health. And we hope that the kids take that home and show it to their parents, right? And talk with their parents about what they learned and how they learned about why mobility and bone and muscle research is important. So that can kind of spread that message out that way, rather than trying to take it directly to the patients. This is a way that we can get that message out to the kids, and they can kind of broadcast it for us as well.
And do you know how can my listeners help? Are there cities that you guys are focused on? Um,
So again,
education happens to be a big uh, Yeah, my listeners love education.
Yeah. So, again, right now we're pretty confined to the annual meeting, so we know where those are going to be for the next few years. So Phoenix is the next one coming up. But I'd say if they want to get involved, certainly support for the program would go a long way in terms of opening up new avenues for the type of programming, helping to advertise it. So if we happen to be coming somewhere nearby where a listener is at, helping us broadcast it and get the word out to the local schools that this is a program they can sign up for, because we've got the capacity to work with a lot of kids. It's just a matter of getting the word out to them and their teachers, more importantly, that these type of events are going on. So from a visibility perspective and a support perspective, I mean, those types of things would be phenomenal.
Okay. Well, Dr. Lawrence, Megan, thank you so much. This has been a very interesting conversation. Any parting words that you'd like to give to our listening public on musculoskeletal issues, the bear or stem?
I think from our perspective as scientists, this has been a weird few years, right? Where there's
Yeah.
been concern about distrust in science and things like that. Ultimately, we're doing these jobs because we care about advancing the field, advancing knowledge, coming up with new solutions. That's why we're doing these things. And so there's nothing behind that. It's just this is what we love to do. We love to find answers to questions and ultimately, hopefully, help society on a broader perspective. So that's what keeps us moving.
It's interesting you talked about distrust in science. Are you seeing, obviously since you guys are putting on a program, are you seeing less of that, or is it still at the same level of distrust that you see it a few years ago?
It's not something that we've measured or anything like that. I will say that I have never so far in the few years that I've been able to do this program, I've never had a kid come back and say, none of this is real, right? Musculoskeletal problems they're not a real problem. They're usually a pretty open and receptive audience to the fact that you should care about your mobility, you should care about your bone and muscle health, your joint health. So at least at the level of the kids that we're interacting with, it's been real refreshing that they're just excited to learn and carry
I,
carry the
I
message.
would be I would be surprised if you hear a patient say that. They might, I mean, because based on the data that you guys are talking about, 75% of folks over 65 have some issue, and 1 in 2 people have some kind of musculoskeletal issue. So I don't see anyone doubting it's not real. Maybe there might be some health gap or something like that people are experiencing.
Yeah,
But
maybe so. I'm
yeah.
not a clinician. I'm not going to try to speak like a clinician, but I can say at least from a scientist perspective, we like to ask questions and figure out the answers to them, and ultimately kind of try to move things forward as much as we can. So
Well, Dr. Meghan McGee-Lawrence, thank you so much for being on the Next Big Thing with Keith Terry. I really appreciate it, and I wish you success for 2024, and thank you for being on the show.
thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Okay, you guys take care. Okay. Thanks for listening to The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support this podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and a review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on my YouTube channel at Keith D. Terry. If you want to recommend a guest, please email me at info@terryperformancegroup.com. This has been produced by your host and Jade Productions.